Bobby Wagner is one signature away from suiting up for a straight-up rival, and what Nikki Javala over at The Athletic dropped, plus 2 Bleacher Report articles that flat-out contradict each other, has Ashburn on high alert. Jacksonville and Dallas are already fighting over the guy Durante Jones needs to anchor the defense that's supposed to protect Jaden Daniels on the way to the playoffs. And in a minute, I'm telling you the move Adam Peters might still have up his sleeve to keep him home, and why letting him walk would be a historic mistake, literally. Meanwhile, inside the building, the guy nobody was talking about is already blowing up camp. Jordan MAGEE is stepping into a role that could flip the entire linebacker scheme, but there's a size problem nobody's addressing that's about to change how you look at this whole defense. And to close it out, DEEBO Samuel just posted a message that sounds like a full goodbye, right as his old Niners teammates are publicly begging him to come back. Stick around, DMV, this one's loaded. Raise hail. Let's start here because it honestly blows my mind that in the middle of July, days before training camp opens, Bobby Wagner is still sitting out there as an unsigned free agent. And here's the wild part, fam. On the same day, 2 separate Bleacher Report articles came out saying completely different things. One says Jacksonville is the most logical landing spot, the other says it's Dallas, and neither one mentions the most obvious option, which is that Wagner simply comes back here to Washington. Let's break this down slowly, because there's a lot to unpack. First, the numbers, because without context, none of this means anything. Wagner played all 17 games last season with us. On a 1-year, $9 million deal, he finished with 162 tackles, 4.5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, and 2 interceptions. For a 36-year-old man, that is not a farewell season. That is a player still playing with the hunger of a 20-something. He completed his 14th straight season with more than 100 tackles. 14. Sit with that for a second. Most linebackers in this league never even play 14 full seasons, and Wagner produced at an elite level in every single one of them, which for a position this physically punishing should honestly be considered abnormal. And here's the number that gives me chills as a fan. With those 162 tackles, Wagner became just the 3rd player in NFL history to cross 2,000 career tackles, the 3rd in over 100 years of professional football. The other 2 are London Fletcher, an absolute legend of this exact franchise with 2,039, and Ray Lewis, Hall of Famer with the Ravens at 2,059. Wagner needs only 60 more tackles to break Lewis's record. 60. Depending on the team and scheme he ends up in, he could hit that mark by the midpoint of the 2026 season, maybe even sooner if he lands somewhere with a snap volume close to what he had here. And that's the uncomfortable question nobody's asking out loud. Do we actually want to watch Bobby Wagner break the NFL's all-time career tackles record wearing another team's jersey? Because think about it. If Jacksonville or Dallas signs him and he breaks that record in October or November, that image lives forever in the history books in a jersey that isn't ours. And honestly, that feels like an avoidable tragedy to me. The same quiet kind of tragedy we already lived through with London Fletcher finishing his career without the national recognition he deserved. Look, I could be wrong, but I think there's a way to fix this, and we'll talk money in a second. Before that, I want to talk about the man behind the player, because this year Wagner won the NFL's Walter Payton Man of the Year award. That award is the honor the entire league considers the most important one there is, way beyond being some consolation trophy, above MVP, above everything else, because it measures a player's impact off the field, in his community, in lives he touches when the cameras aren't rolling. Wagner gave a speech that catches you completely off guard, talking about his mother, Fannie Mae, who died of a stroke when he was just 19 years old. He said, in his own words in front of the entire league, that he almost didn't go that night, that he didn't have the confidence to walk up on that stage, but he did it because his mom was the one person who believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. His foundation, the Fannie Mae Fund, educates people about stroke warning signs and provides financial support to families going through what he went through when he was barely a teenager. This man built something permanent out of his pain, way beyond just being a historic tackler. And that, for me, makes the possibility of losing him to a rival hurt even more, because we're not just talking stats here, we're talking about a piece of human legacy that we'd love to see finish right here, in this house. Now let's talk business, because this is where the cold, calculated part of the story comes in. Nikki Javala of The Athletic reported that Wagner told reporters he hasn't thought about anything beyond today when asked about his playing future. That sounds to me like a man who genuinely doesn't know yet where he's going to land, or who's waiting for the right offer before committing to any organization. Spotrac projects his market value at around a one-year $7.7 million deal, a relatively small step down from the $9 million he made last season. That means we're talking about a contract that's perfectly affordable for almost any team with cap space available, including, listen closely, the Commanders themselves, who still have room to maneuver without touching this season's priorities. And here's my honest opinion, no holding back. I think Adam Peters needs to sit down with Wagner before July is over and offer him a one-year deal, even if it's symbolic compared to what he made in his prime, so this man can finish his career, or at least this specific season in Washington. I'm not talking about a massive contract or competing dollar for dollar against another offer. I'm talking about something close to what Spotrac is already projecting, maybe with a little loyalty bonus on top for the intangible value he brings in the locker room. Yes, we already brought in Leo Chenal, we already have Frankie Louvu, we already have rookie Sonny Styles competing for reps, and we'll get to that in a minute. But bringing Wagner back in a reduced role, as situational rotation on short yardage and goal line packages, doesn't hurt anybody from a cap standpoint, and it gives this organization the chance to control the narrative of a historic record that's building right now in front of our eyes. Now, to be fair to the other side of this argument, because we're not just here to say what we want to hear. Jacksonville makes sense because they just won the AFC South under rookie head coach Liam Cohen, and they're in go-for-it mode. They need veteran leadership and depth in the middle of the field to sustain that competitive jump. Dallas makes sense because, let's be honest, the Cowboys have had a massive hole at inside linebacker for years, and a veteran of this caliber would give them immediate stability at the point of attack on defense, which their coordinator desperately needs. Neither option is ridiculous, and honestly, both are backed by solid football arguments I can't just dismiss out of sentimentality, but neither one, for me, beats the emotional and even financial logic of simply bringing him back to Ashburn, where he already knows the system, already has the locker room's trust, and needs zero adjustment period. Tell me in the comments, fam, would you bring Wagner back on a one-year deal, even in a reduced role? Or do you think the organization has already moved on and this isn't a priority for the front office? I want to read both sides of this one. Okay, but this gets even more interesting, because while Wagner's future is still up in the air, inside the building they've already started building what comes after him. And what they're building doesn't look anything like what you'd imagine. Mitchell Tischler of Monumental Sports Network went on the Kevin Sheehan show on the Team 980 this week, talking about Jordan MAGEE, the third-year linebacker Washington selected in the 5th round of the 2024 draft, and he used a word I loved: monster. He said MAGEE isn't going to be on the field for even 50% of defensive snaps, but on short yardage downs, in run situations, he can be a piece that blows up blockers and gets straight to the ball carrier. And he compared him, with some nuance, to the specific role Wagner played last year in this exact scheme. This is where I have to put on my tactical analyst hat, because this comparison, while well-intentioned, has a real physical problem worth discussing honestly. MAGEE measures 6'3", around 225 pounds. Wagner, in his prime form with us, played at 6 feet, roughly 242 pounds, but with an anchor density that very few linebackers in this league have. The difference isn't just height, it's pure anchor strength. Playing in the middle of the field, in that guard center guard box we call the phone booth, requires a body that can absorb the hit from a 300-pound guard climbing to the second level and still stay on his feet long enough to finish the tackle. Wagner had that anchor to spare. The real question, and honestly I don't have the answer yet, is whether MAGEE has that naturally or whether he's going to need Darren Payne and the rest of the defensive line to consistently eat up double teams to keep him clean. If that doesn't happen consistently, MAGEE runs a real risk of becoming an exploitable weakness on rundowns instead of the asset Tischler is describing with so much enthusiasm. But here's what I think is the real story behind this news. And it's something almost nobody in the public analysis is connecting correctly. The Commanders aren't trying to find a Wagner clone. They are literally changing the entire profile of the linebacker position. Durante Jones, the new defensive coordinator, comes from a school of thought directly tied to Brian Flores, the most aggressive and creative pressure designer in the league over the last several years. That means constant blitz packages, pre-snap disguises that confuse the opposing quarterback, and linebackers who need to be naturally athletic and versatile, not just physical anchors standing in the middle of the field waiting for impact. Look at the pieces they brought in to execute this vision. Leo Chenal, a free agent addition from Kansas City, a 250-pound man who blitzed freely under Steve Spagnuolo, one of the most respected pressure coordinators in modern football today. Sonny Styles, this year's 7th overall draft pick, a 243-pound player already drawing direct comparisons to Wagner for his natural instincts and coverage range. And Frankie Louvu, Wagner's former rotation partner from last season, a player built specifically to get downhill fast toward the quarterback and create chaos in the backfield. My honest read on this is that Sonny Styles is the true long-term heir to Wagner, not MAGEE. Styles has the size, the age, and the draft capital invested in him to become the voice and emotional anchor of this defense for the next 5 or 6 years. Exactly the kind of investment a front office makes when they're planning to build around a player for half a decade. MAGEE, meanwhile, is going to fight for a niche role, a situational short yardage package, competing directly with Louvu for those specific snaps on the field. And honestly, that internal competition is healthy for the team. It puts real pressure on MAGEE to show at camp that he can add functional weight without losing reaction speed, which is exactly the kind of technical adjustment that separates a reliable rotational player from a guy who ends up on special teams only. There's one more thing I want to highlight, and it's the real reason Washington is consciously moving away from Wagner's exact mold. Wagner, in his last season here, had genuine coverage issues against tight ends and backs coming out of the backfield. I'm not saying this to disrespect a legend who gave absolutely everything to this franchise. I'm saying it because it's a documented tactical fact, and it's exactly why Jones is building a defense that relies less on one single linebacker covering open space by himself, and more on constant pressure and pre-snap disguises, never giving the opposing quarterback enough time to exploit those individual coverages. It's a complete philosophy shift, not a simple name for name replacement. It's not about replacing a man, it's about redesigning the tactical problem that man used to solve with his experience and instincts. For fans who will be watching training camp closely over the next few weeks, here's what I'd be paying attention to: how Jones divides snaps between Louvu, Chenal, and Styles in the first scrimmages, and whether MAGEE manages to add functional weight without sacrificing the explosive burst that made him stand out in previous camps under Dan Quinn. If MAGEE doesn't show real physical progress by the end of August, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up as a special teams asset first and a rotational defensive linebacker second, with Louvu absorbing most of those situational snaps. Fam, this genuinely has me excited about this team's pure football, beyond all the contract and free agency drama. But before I close things out today, I need to tell you about a story that hits straight in the feelings for anyone who enjoyed watching this man play for us last season. DEEBO Samuel is still an unsigned free agent, and this week 2 of his former San Francisco teammates, George Kittle and Kyle Juszczyk, publicly called on social media for him to come back to the 49ers. DEEBO, for his part, posted a message on Instagram that sounds straight out of a resignation anthem. Let the chips fall where they may, basically accepting that his future is out of his immediate control. Let's put this in real context because there's a full narrative behind this message that a lot of casual fans are missing. After the 2024 season, DEEBO made it clear publicly that he wanted a change of scenery, preferably on the East Coast. And that's how he ended up wearing burgundy and gold last season, in what was supposed to be an explosive shot in the arm for our offense. But let's be honest with each other, fam, because this channel doesn't exist to sugarcoat what we actually saw on the field. DEEBO's production with us wasn't what everyone expected when that deal got done. 727 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns, and an average of 10.1 yards per catch, the lowest of his entire career, continuing a steady decline from the 14.9 yards per catch he averaged back in 2023. His best season is still, by far, 2021, still with the 49ers, when he racked up 1,770 scrimmage yards and 14 touchdowns in a single year. He hasn't topped 900 receiving yards in a single season since then, which speaks to a real and sustained decline in his offensive production. Now, having just turned 30 and still without a team this far into July, the raw reality of the market is rough for him. San Francisco completely rebuilt their receiver room this offseason, bringing in Mike Evans as a reliable red zone weapon, bringing in Christian Kirk for the slot, drafting DeJon Stribling with early capital, all of that after losing Jawan Jennings and Kendrick Bourne in the same window. The original 49ers Web Zone article is pretty clear on something important: a reunion with DEEBO, while emotionally appealing for nostalgic fans and for his former teammates who want him back, looks unlikely in the actual practice of current roster building. And this is what leaves me thinking deeply as a Commanders fan. If DEEBO ends up back in San Francisco or anywhere else in the league, that specific Washington chapter closes for good, and the conversation inevitably shifts to what the front office decides to do in his place on the offensive roster. I don't think having him here was a total failure. 5 touchdowns and the leadership he brought to the locker room carry real value that doesn't show up purely in receiving stats. But I also can't, a hand on my heart, say it was the offensive investment we all expected when he arrived with so much hype last season. Keep it a buck with me. This is a player who's already past his peak production, and any team that signs him now is betting that the right system and the right quarterback can squeeze out one more good season. Not that he magically turns back into the dominant 2021 version of DEEBO. And that's everything I've got for you today, Commanders Nation. Look, 3 stories, 3 completely different flavors today. Wagner with an uncertain future that I'm hoping ends back here before he breaks a historic record wearing another team's jersey. A defense rebuilding piece by piece under Durante Jones's vision, with Sonny Styles emerging as the true quiet heir to that position. And DEEBO probably closing his entire Washington chapter while his old teammates in San Francisco call him back home with public messages. This franchise keeps moving, keeps making tough decisions every single day, and as fans, our job stays the same: demand excellence without ever losing the passion that brings us back to this channel every day. Hail to the Redskins, always. If this video gave you something, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me down in the comments which of these 3 stories hit you hardest today. See you in the next one.